Hello. Welcome to the last Bourbon Talk of 2022. Right before the holidays. I hope everyone is doing well, hanging in there. You got some good plans with some good people. Get to enjoy some family, some friends, all that good stuff. Cheers. It is so good to be here, as always. Um, I wanted to talk tonight about a bunch of important stuff. We got a bunch of questions, and we got some good questions. We got some good topics to talk about. But I also want to fill you in a little bit on what's coming down the pike and where things are going and what we're about to deal with, not just in the political sphere, but also you and I and these bourbon talks and the podcast and the writing and all of that good stuff, where we're going. We also need to talk about 2022. What a year. I I, I don't know about you. It was a lot of different things. That's the only way that I actually know how to explain it. In a lot of ways, 2022 was really challenging, both personally and also politically, but also, and I'll cheers to this, some of the best things, some of the best things. So, cheers to that. So, here we are. We're going to get to questions here in just a few minutes. But again, I hope you have a fantastic holiday. I hope everybody is staying safe and healthy. It feels like everybody I know at this point is coming down either with COVID or with flu. It's no fun, obviously. Hopefully, it doesn't mess with your holiday travel. So it's already messed with my travel a little bit. Thought I was going to get to meet a little baby friend of mine from a friend of mine who just had their second kid. Didn't get to do that. Disappointing, but we know how these things go. But hopefully, we have a good holiday season. Hopefully politics will chill out for a while. Maybe it'll give us a little bit of a breath of fresh air. I don't know if you all remember a few years back, there was the debt ceiling debacle that almost like took us over the cliff right around Christmas. That sucked. That wasn't fun. I think we might, fingers crossed, avoid any sort of ugliness before we can get out of the year. I'm really excited about 2023. Really, really excited about 23. For a variety of reasons. I had talked about on an earlier episode of Bourbon Talk. I want to say it wasn't last episode, but maybe the episode before. I think I had talked about how in 23 I was going to dedicate myself to organizing and getting into the fight. That's taking shape. I've got a couple of really exciting, cool projects that I cannot wait to tell you about. One I'll be talking to you about probably, let's say February, something along those lines. But the other one, I hope that I will be going out into the country, selling The Midnight Kingdom, The History of Power, Paranoia, and the Coming Crisis. And while I'm on book tour and while I'm going around the country, I'm hoping to meet you. I'm hoping to come to your city. If you haven't already, talk to your independent bookstore and tell them I would be absolutely thrilled to come out and meet you and hang out at your bookstore. But also, I really, really want to go out and meet some of the people who are on the front lines of this crisis. I want to meet labor unions. I want to meet people who should be in labor unions. I want to meet people who are fighting the fight on the front lines, who are working to make this a better world, who are engaging in active solidarity and active democracy. And I want to make myself available for all of those people. And if you are in a situation, either at your workplace or in your community, and you need help, I want you to reach out to me because I am going to be making that a priority. I want to go out. I want to meet people. I want to get to know people. I want to build trust and networks and communities. And I'm just, I'm so excited. And I want to tell you that I truly believe that 2023 is going to be uh, an integral year. 24, obviously, we all know that 2024 is going to be absolutely all over the place in the lead up to the presidential election, which is already taking weird shape, and that's something that we'll talk about a little bit later. But 23, I truly believe, is going to be the moment where we are going to determine, at least in the near future, what shape these things are going to take. I wrote about it in my Substack. I wrote about what I was keeping an eye on next year, and there is a growing democratic people's movement, not just in the United States but around the world. The question now is, what does that become? Does its spent energy just sort of die on the vine? Does it just go away? Is this something that we look back on the past couple of years, particularly post COVID, and we say, isn't it strange that suddenly all of these impromptu labor unions started? Isn't it strange that all these protests began? And maybe that's a momentary blip. Maybe that is a historical anomaly, particularly in this moment of anti-labor sentiment, but also in a time where there isn't a lot of institutional support, there isn't a lot of administrative support. Or are we going to take that beginnings, the beginnings of a fire? Are we going to take like the little bit of a spark, and are we going to feed it? Are we going to take it somewhere? Are we going to continue to settle for the type of leadership that doesn't actually represent us? And not only does it not represent us, it makes the problem worse. It makes the crisis worse because, as we have talked about on this live stream before, we have a government that has been absolutely co-opted by concentrated wealth and power, and continuing to elect the same people and expecting the same different results. That's the definition of insanity, and we have to stop that. I have to go out and fight, and you need to go out and fight, and today we're going to talk about what it is that we can do and how it is that we need to create these situations that are going to be beneficial and are actually going to start to change the world. Now, that doesn't mean that we have complete control, because complete control is a total illusion. The idea that you can simply do one thing and suddenly everything changes, that's impossible. One thing that we have to deal with is our ability to control certain things and to understand how other things might necessarily be out of our control, or maybe they're out of our control for a moment. There are a lot of things that are up in the air that are going to probably start to be settled or moving towards settled in 2023. What's going to happen with the economy? The American economy is not just a house of cards. It's a house of cards on a stack of plates on top of a foundation of sand. It could fall apart at any moment. And the reason it's like that is because the fundamentals have not been put back into place, particularly after 2008. But all of the safeguards, all of the things, all the regulations that are supposed to make this work, they've been absolutely taken out since after the New Deal consensus had fallen apart and been destroyed. So the economy, who the hell knows what's going to happen with that? Who knows what's going to happen with the authoritarian movement around the world? China is being pressured. Russia is on the precipice of something unbelievable. You look at what's happening in Iran. There are so many different elements that are at play, but this isn't a sit back and watch situation. I would urge you, going into this next year, because you're on, I mean, listen, you're tuning into this, and I understand that sometimes this is about spectatorship. I understand that sometimes this is about spending time with politics as a food for thought. I get that. But I also think that it's not a coincidence that you're watching this stream right now, that you're also worried about what's going on in the world. Obviously, because of the conversations that we have and the conversations that Nick and I have on the Muckrake podcast and the things that I write in my books, you have an idea of what's going on. And obviously, it concerns you. Otherwise, you would have tuned me out already. So obviously, you care. Obviously, you are competent, you are intelligent, you are passionate. I would urge you going into 2023 to move away from spectatorship and move into action. And there are so many different ways to do that. And we're going to discuss more of those tonight. And we're going to continue discussing them when I come back. I have to imagine I'll probably do the next bourbon talk, maybe the first weekend in January. That's a real possibility. I'll put out a notice about that. But I would love if for your New Year's resolution, one of them, I suppose, if you decide in some way, shape, or form that you are going to take what we are talking about and these discussions that we have had, and the energies, by the way, that we have created in these communities and in these discussions and in these places, that maybe somehow in your life and in your community and in your family and in your social circles, we take that energy and we put it into practice. And I say that we need to do that because so many things are up in the air. I have to imagine that in 2022, at moments, you have felt a shift in energy. You have felt a shift in terms of how things are working, probably a shift in terms of what is possible, because you have been told, probably for the majority of your life, that change is nearly impossible. People don't change, circumstances don't change, the world doesn't change. And here's the thing, I have to assume that at some point you felt that maybe something was more possible than it was in the past. And that is because of the way that the world is moving right now, the way that these systems are in crisis, the way that they are starting to lose some of their concreteness, the way that they are starting to shift and creak. Like, because of that, all of a sudden now, there feels like there is a possibility that something somewhere has to change. And that feeling is correct. The status quo as it is arranged right now, the status quo that I have known my entire life. I'm 41 years old, which means that I was a child watching America supposedly in its ascent. It was always going to be this perfect nation, God's chosen nation. And if I worked hard, then all of a sudden I was going to get what I deserved. But then all of a sudden in the 1990s, it was like, oh, wow, this is like a bonanza. It's a party in the USA, right? And then, of course, I came of age, and I'm so sure that so many of you did. You came of age when all of a sudden America went in search of more empire for neoliberalism. America started to eat itself and cannibalize itself. And what we're watching in 2016 to 2022, this period that we're in right now, like, it didn't just happen. It wasn't just an aberration. It was that status quo beginning to creak and starting to fall apart. That means that something must replace it. Either the authoritarian right and by the way, the liberal middle, which is something we're going to talk about, either they are going to reinforce it using exploitation and authoritarianism, or we're going to replace it with something better. And we have options. And the only way that we're going to be able to assert ourselves, the only way that we're going to be able to make sure that this world gets better, and my God, it has to, because you deserve better, and I deserve better, and everybody deserves better. And we're going to talk more about that in a minute. We can make this better. We actually truly can. And that's the problem, is we have to come to believe that we can actually make things better and that we can actually change this entire situation, because we can. And the window is opening, and we have to recognize when that window opens. And we have to go ahead and put in the work to make it possible that we can change things when that window finally flies open. Now, on that note, let's start with the questions, and I'll go ahead and work in some of the things I wanted to talk about here. Tim J says, I saw you wanted to talk tonight about reasons for hope and concern. What did you see in 2022 that gave you the most to worry about and the most to be hopeful about? So, they're related. Shocking. I know. It's almost like that's how these things work. I'll tell you what concerned me. It's a combination of things. One, it's the fact that the powers that be, the leaders who are supposed to lead us and supposed to change the world, and they're supposed to, make the world better. They still do not understand what is going on. There were moments, and in the lead up to November, I got the feeling that there were moments where President Biden understood, at least to an extent, exactly what he was dealing with what he called the MAGA Republicans, but it was also the Republican Party, which is something that he absolutely steadfastly refuses to understand. It's something that Pelosi and Schumer and a lot of them have absolutely refused to understand and look in the face, because it's an indictment of how they have done politics and what they've done with the world. That is problematic. That caused me a lot of concern, is that there hasn't been an answer by the Democratic Party, which is one of the reasons why we have to assert ourselves. It's one of the reasons why we have to put pressure on that party, is to see if there is an ability to pressure it from the outside, because they take our votes for granted. They take us for granted, and they have since the 1980s into the late 1990s, when the Democratic Party realigned and left its traditional voting base. They just knew that they had all of the votes of all the people who usually didn't vote Republican. They took it for granted. Now we have to put pressure onto them in a lot of different ways. There's a reason why the Biden administration hasn't supported labor unions. There's a reason why most of these so-called leftist institutions and media operations, they don't talk about labor. They don't talk about protest. They don't talk about grassroots action. Why don't they talk about it? Because they have a very certain perspective that keeps them from wanting to give that any attention. They want it to go away. And in fact, they are free market neoliberals to the to a certain extent, in certain ways, and in certain operation, which we'll talk more about in a second. But that's problematic. That concerned me. But the other thing that concerned me the most is something that we're watching right now, which is, as the myth, and I wrote about this on Substack, as we are watching the myth of the meritocracy, the myth of the great men of history, the techno feudal lords and messiahs who are going to not only revolutionize business, but they're going to get us off this planet, guys. They're going to get us to Mars. They're going to make sure that we are delivered the future. And my God, they'll probably even solve death before they're done with it. That myth has necessarily started falling apart. Those robber barons are starting to be revealed for what they are. And with that, there is an opportunity, as that myth starts to fall apart. There's the opportunity to create other things. There's an opportunity to start pushing back against these people. Elon Musk is doing us just an invaluable favor in showing us that he is incapable of running any business. It doesn't matter what it is, and that he is largely a creation of the media, largely a creation of politicians, and largely a creation of the wealth class, who is desperate for people like Elon Musk to go out and say stuff that they don't mean and that they could never actually fulfill. As that starts to fall apart, they get desperate. We're told a myth constantly. And this is a really problematic myth. We're told a myth that, when the Great Depression happened, Franklin D. Roosevelt came in and said, "Hey, here's a new deal." And everyone's like, "Yeah, absolutely. Great. This is awesome." That's not what happened. The industrialists, the corporations, the wealthy, who had created their own super wealth class in all that time, and also destroyed the economy and basically pushed everybody into a fascist abyss, those people did not want to give any power up. And as a result, they not only opposed FDR in the New Deal, they tried to overthrow him. They tried to carry out a coup. And guess what they did when they couldn't carry out their coup? They gave money to the fascists. And that wasn't just in Germany. That wasn't just in Italy, which, by the way, is where all of those wealthy industrialists went ahead and gave a ton of money to the fascists. It also happened here. The wealth class will automatically turn to fascist and authoritarians in order to protect themselves and their wealth. That's what's happening right now. What's happening right now is that you have a historically wealthy class of people because they have gamed the system and the system has been gamed for them through neoliberalism. It should concern everybody that people like Elon Musk are not only showing us that the myth that surrounds them, this cult, this messiah like idea that surrounds them, which is absolutely full of shit. You have to understand that when they are troubled and when they are uncomfortable, and my God, should they be made uncomfortable, but when they are, they start throwing their money towards fascist. This is the scary part of all of this, is that we are inching up on a part of history where this wealth class is going to be made to feel uncomfortable, and conditions are probably going to worsen in certain ways, and they're going to start feeling some heat. And by the way, we're going to have to make them feel some heat. You have to understand that the solution to this problem is not an easy one. They are going to go towards the right. They are going to go towards authoritarianism. That's concerning. Watching what Musk is doing right now is not only disturbing in and of itself, it's a preview of what's going to happen with people like Musk as this continues. And you can't put that toothpaste back in the tube. Now, what do I feel hopeful about? It's everything I've been talking about. There is an energy in this country and around the world that is irrepressible. People are starting to take stock of what's going on around them. They're starting to understand that, like, maybe just sitting down and shutting up isn't enough. Maybe the systems actually are against them. Maybe these things are actually wired in a certain way that are not fair and also are essentially and inherently classist and white supremacist and patriarchal. It is obvious, and somebody just said British politics is already heading there. You're absolutely right. People are starting to look through all of these illusions. They're saying, who are you supposed to represent again? Because I got to tell you, nobody that I'm voting for is actually looking out for my best interest. No one that I'm voting for actually seems to be much on my side. Nobody that I seem to be voting for actually really deserves my vote for the most part, with a few exceptions. That is awakening. And people are not only starting to distrust politicians and the wealthy, they're starting to distrust their own understandings of how life is supposed to work. The conversations that I'm having with people on a constant basis now are people who are tired of living their lives the way that they have lived them. They're tired of feeling the way that they have felt. They're tired of living in these oppressive, exploitative systems. They're working on themselves. They're healing. They're trying like hell to build communities with other people. They're throwing away hard-hearted cynicism and just absolutely petty angry making situations. They're tired of it. And they're starting to work on themselves, they're starting to work on their relationships, and they're starting to work on their communities. It's so much easier to be asleep when things are good. It's so much easier to not worry about making yourself better when you're comfortable. Well, guess what? America is in decline. So-called Western civilization is in decline. Global capitalism, it's in decline. Now, it's determined to reinforce itself through hook or by crook or through violence or dictators. It's going to try and do it. But my God, is it starting to creak and groan. And as a result, the pressure is coming down the line. We have a lot of Americans right now who and I'm sorry to say this, but they were more than fine living off of the suffering of others. They have been fine with global capitalism, even though it was on the backs of people. There are people all around the world who have been hurting, who have been exploited. Their lives have been spent in something that Americans consider apocalyptic conditions, something that we've been terrified of. Well, guess what? The bill is coming due and things are getting hard. They've been hard since the neoliberal consensus started to take over. That's all deindustrialization. All of a sudden, a lot of the liberal middle class trappings of life, they started going away. Now the entirety of the world is tuned to the expressed interest and benefit of the wealthy and corporations. All of a sudden, you look around, you're like, man, this sucks. Maybe it could be better. Maybe it could be better. 2022 to me, particularly, and I say post-pandemic, of course, it's not the heart of the pandemic, of course. But 2022 felt like a moment where we had enough distance from that. And also, of course, we had this midterm where people were able to sort of say, man, I really don't want to vote for those Republicans, but also those Democrats, they don't feel great either. I feel like right now that this is the moment where people are starting to say, I think it could be better. I actually do. I think it could be better. And my God, I don't have much to lose anymore. Not only am I living paycheck to paycheck, but the people I love are suffering. You know, the people I love are getting older, and they've suffered their entire lives because they've been exploited by greedy assholes. It pisses me off. It should piss you off too. So I've been hopeful. I keep saying it, and listen, I those of you who've been watching these things for a while, you've seen me say this. Like, I get it that I've spent a lot of time documenting and diagnosing what's going on. But I gotta tell you, I am hopeful because I've seen what humans are capable of. I've seen people change. I've seen people get better. I've seen lives improve. And I have to tell you, I have absolute faith that it's going to be okay. It's not gonna be easy. We're gonna have to work our asses off. We're gonna have to fight like hell, but it's gonna work out. If we do all that, it's gonna work out. Not gonna be easy. On that note, this is a summary of a question. Somebody on Twitter was talking to me about something, and I asked them if I could have permission to talk about this tonight. This was a person named Aaron, and Aaron said that she had been accepted into an administration program, and she wanted to know. And by the way, the impetus for this was I'll just say that the Secretary of Education, I posted about this on Twitter. One of the one of the craziest things, but obviously very telling. Basically, the Secretary of Education said that all children should find a way to do what corporations and the wealthy need them to do, which is whew, as a former member of the academy, that sums up a lot of the problems that I saw. I'll just say that. But Aaron said that she had gotten accepted into an administration program, and Aaron said, you know, is it possible to do something in a program like that or with a job like that? Um, is it possible to use it for good, or is it ultimately corrupting? And this is a hard question. This is a big, meaty question that we have to talk about. I'll say this: there is not a job that can't be corruptive. And here's the reason why. And this is something that I hope you take from this bourbon talk and maybe remember in the future. It is almost impossible to be completely ethical within an unethical system. And capitalism is by design an unethical system. It is designed to bring out the worst in us. It is designed to take advantage and profit from the worst of us, and that is repulsive. But you also need to make a living. You also need to, in some way, shape, or form, operate within the system, at least in order to keep the lights on and, you know, keep your kids in socks or whatever. So here's what I would say. And I want to answer this question from the beginning by giving you a little bit of history. Administrative studies has its background. It can be traced back to Woodrow Wilson, one of the worst presidents in the history of the United States of America, one of the most racist, classist assholes that you could ever find in history. And Woodrow Wilson was an elitist. Woodrow Wilson believed, and in his time as an academic, believed that there was a stratified difference between classes, that some people were meant to lead. Some people were natural born leaders, and they should basically be unquestioned in terms of power. Not shocking, by the way, that he was a slavery apologist in his academic work, but that's neither here nor there. But also he believed that there were a group of people who should be led, who should probably never even come close to the levers of power. It has its origins, by the way, in Plato's allegory of the cave. The idea that, you should basically have a bunch of people in this cave who are just sort of like kept hostage watching these shadows on the wall while people who are better than them control the shadows and control the world outside the cave. Woodrow Wilson co opted the energies of the progressive movement in the early 20th century and created a new administrative state full of just these basically experts. They were people who knew better and they basically carried out the operations of government. Most of them, by the way, unelected. Most of them completely unknown to the normal person. Of course, there was a Woodrow Wilson there to give some speeches, right? Because you have to vote for somebody. But behind him were just a bunch of experts who, in some way, shape, or form, they might never be removed. This is where the conspiracy theory of the deep state partly comes from. In part, it comes from Jewish anti Semitic conspiracy theories, but also it has to do with this idea of administration. Administration can be really, really problematic. It is elitist, it is classist, it's oppressive, it's exploitative. It can absolutely hurt people. It can hinder people. It can hinder progress. Woodrow Wilson wanted to create a system that people would just look at. They would never understand it. They would almost look at it and marvel, but they would never think about possibly changing anything. Sound familiar? Because that's how modern government was created, was through that administrative idea. But there is a pushback within administrative circles now. Ethical administration, starting to push back against these power differences, starting to get buy in from communities and creating something better. So here's what I would say to Aaron in terms of the administrative question, but I also want to talk to everybody else too. You can work within systems of power and unethical systems. You can go into them and you can reform them and you can fight for change from within them. I think anybody who tells you different, to be honest, I think they're afraid of the possibilities of corruption because corruption is omnipresent. The question is, how do you do it? How do you do it? How do I do it? I'll tell you how I do it, and you can extrapolate from that. If I say something that sounds right, or if I say something that sounds accurate or useful, I hope you'll take it. The only thing that I know is how I deal with it, because I am a person who has to live within capitalism. I spend most of my time telling you why capitalism is so dangerous and is basically going to lead to authoritarianism and an earth that is absolutely cooked to the point of near extinction. But I have to operate within it. I have to do a lot of introspection. The easiest thing in the world is to go on autopilot and to tell yourself a story, ideology, right? Tell yourself a narrative, which is, I'm doing this. Obviously, I have the best interest of everyone in heart. And you can get to a point where that picks up momentum and you just do things because you learn not to question yourself. You exist within it. And then there are these moments, and I'm sure you've had them too. You wake up in the middle of the night with a gnawing anxiety or a question, which is, why do I do the things that I do? Am I doing the right things? Am I being a good person? The only way to avoid those gnawing, nagging questions that keep you up at night, keep you doing all kinds of things that hurt you and hurt the people that you care about. The only way that you can do that is constant introspection, asking, why do I do the things that I do? Am I on the right path right now? Am I being true to myself right now? You can be within systems of power. You can be within corruptive institutions. You can be within corruptive places, and you have to keep yourself in check. You have to ask the hard questions. You have to interrogate yourself with kindness, but you have to ask. I feel good about the fact that Aaron asked this question about how can I be ethical within administration? The fact that you were asking that is more than half the battle. It's the people who don't ask that. It's the people who say, I should be there. I should have the levers of power. Because those are the people right now who are involved in politics. Those are the ones who are involved in technocracy and neoliberalism. They think that they're better. They think that they are so much better than everybody else. They don't have to interrogate. They don't have to question. They don't have to look after themselves. It's about introspection. It's about taking care of self. It's about working through self. So I hope you do it. And I hope you find an outlet. And I hope sometime, and I'm sure that this has been something that you've experienced out in the world. Everybody here. You have to have moments where you're within a system of power and exploitation and you're able to help other people. You're able to see through duty. You're able to see through requirements. You're able to see through the bloodless exploitation that we all have to do. And all of a sudden, you find your places to be empathic. You find your places to help other people out. That's solidarity. That's how we treat other people. That's what we should be striving for all along. But it's about asking. It's about continually asking, is what it is. Speaking of solidarity, Chris says, going forward, solidarity is an essential part of our movement. Problem is, society is set up to hinder regular people forming solidarity with each other. How do we reclaim unions and solidarity when neoliberalism has made these out as four-letter words? First things first, I think going into these places and talking to people is about building trust. I got to tell you, when you're dealing I'm sorry, but I really doubt that there are many workplaces anymore, there are many institutions anymore where people aren't feeling the pinch and the exploitation. I think you talk about the possibility of making things better. It's when you talk about conditions. It's when you talk about whether you're respected or disrespected, whether or not you're being abused by employers, whether or not corporations and these hedge funds and you name it, whether or not they're doing something that is decent or whether or not they're doing something that is just absolutely illogically harmful. I'll tell you this as somebody, and I haven't talked very much about it, but as somebody who left academia, I can tell you that one of the reasons why I wanted to leave academia was because I saw people being destroyed. I saw people being destroyed by administration that you shouldn't trust, by neoliberalism and the drying up of austerity. I saw people being broken. I saw people being hurt. I saw people falling apart. I saw so much unnecessary suffering. And when you talk about it has to be a thing where you talk about the fact that people deserve better. And what we're talking about right now, it is about convincing that you do deserve better. It is about convincing that you could have better. It's continuing to expect the same results and the same suffering. Eventually, over time, you come to believe that there's nothing else that could happen. You come to believe, it's a fait accompli. There's nothing we could do. It's just always going to be like this. Same shit, different day. You know how it is. The problem is that things actually can change. Things actually can be made different. And they can be made different if we can talk to one another and start to imagine a combined goal. Why? There's more of us. And do you know what history tells us? It tells us we win. We actually win when we go after this. When we actually say, you know what, that's not going to work for me. You can change everything in so many different ways. We live in cells where we don't feel like we could possibly ever get out, and the door has been unlocked all along. And in this case, it is about coming to an understanding that we deserve better and we can do better. So we can talk about labor unions. We can talk about organizing. I think it begins with conversations. It begins with sharing the idea of where we are, what's happening, and what could be different. At the very, very least, you can actually get some of your problems addressed. Things could actually improve. If you actually go in a united front and ask an employer for something that isn't, being handled the right way, sometimes they'll go ahead and change it. That's a victory. And by the way, that builds solidarity. You win. If you win, winning is addictive and it can grow and it can build off of that foundation. But also, sometimes that's how movements start. That's how revolutions start. There's a reason why labor unions and solidarity movements change the world. You go from, oh, I can't trust that person. You go from, oh, there's no possible way that I could ever talk to somebody about this. There's no possible way that I could ever do anything about this, to suddenly knowing that someone has your back. And not just everybody. Not just one person. Entire communities, entire countries. You look up and the next thing you know, you have a revolutionary situation. That's how you do it. That's how you build it. But it has to be about starting to build a shared language, a shared reality, a shared experience, and a shared cause. That's how we do it. On that same similar note, Mary Stem, I want to know how to talk about it, everything, with those not so sure involved who think, oh, that's too much. Please let's not talk about politics, to educate and motivate without turning them off. So here's a big giant thing. You don't talk politics. That's one of the great secrets in all of this. And here's how you do it. You'll notice we're 42 minutes in here to this bourbon talk. I want to point that out for a reason. Do you notice that we haven't really talked about elections yet? Do you notice that we haven't talked about, oh man, who's going to be the nominee in 2024? Is it going to be Joe Biden versus Donald Trump, part 2, or is it going to be Joe Biden versus Ron DeSantis? That's not what we're talking about right now. We'll get to that. There is stuff that we need to talk about in terms of politics, and people have asked questions here. But when you start breaking it down, people are tired of politics in that regard. And one of the reasons why they're tired of politics in that regard is because they keep voting for people and those people don't help them. The answer is to start talking about how people are experiencing the world. What is happening in our politics is a reflection of what we feel and what we don't feel and what we find and what we don't find and what we're terrified of. You know why conspiracy theories are so prevalent in society today? Because people don't know what the hell is going on, but they know something's wrong. It just so happens that basically the only people talking to them with any amount of power are Republicans who are backed by wealthy people who don't want people to put together the pieces and know that they are responsible. Okay? When you see someone go down the conspiracy theory rabbit hole, chances are that they're not doing great. And I'm talking about them as people. I'm talking about them as individuals. The people that I know who have fallen for QAnon and gone down those rabbit holes, they're in personal crises. Their lives are falling apart. They're having relationship problems. They're having job problems. They're not able to pay the bills. They have unchecked mental illness, you name it. There's something wrong with them that politics then expresses. It's not the other way around. We've been told a lie. So the way that we talk to people, if they would say, oh, it's politics, we talk to them about what's going on in their lives. We ask what's happening with them. We ask what's concerning them. And guess what's concerning them? It's the fact that this isn't a fair world. It's the fact that this is a world that is tuned specifically to screw them. It's a world that is designed to exploit them. It's a world that is designed to make sure that their kids aren't going to have better lives, that their communities are going to fall apart. They need to talk about what's going on in their lives, and then we can talk about why it's happening. That is the corridor. We don't talk about politics, universe, all this stuff, Democrats, Republicans, red and blue. You talk about the person. You talk about what's going on in their lives, what they've seen, what they've felt, what they've experienced. And by the way, most of them probably haven't been asked for a while. Most of them probably haven't had a real intimate conversation about what's going on in their lives in forever. They're probably desperate for it. They're starving for it. Ask people questions. Ask them what's going on in their lives. Don't just wait to talk. Ask them what's going on. Take an interest in their lives. Take an interest in what's going on. And once you do that, you're not even talking about politics. You're talking about life, and then you're talking about politics. And that makes all of the difference. That's what happens. Northwest Woman has two questions. One, how can we talk to MAGA friends and families about their collective delusion? So much disinformation is pumped in their head. Will we ever be able to open their eyes? Also, interested in neoliberals. Who are they, and are there any viable organized movements to concentrate on putting forth untouchable type candidates? So, a couple things. Talking to those people who have gone down those rabbit holes, again, it's about talking to them as individuals. It's about finding out what's going on in their lives. And, if they want to talk about conspiracies, they want to talk about satanic cabals, pedophile cabals, any of that stuff, as Urbana just said it, ask how are you and actually mean it. And fine shouldn't be the answer. That's exactly right. Ask them how they're doing. Talk to them about their things. They are going down conspiracy theory rabbit holes because they don't feel like they have anybody else to talk to. And they're creating their own communities, and particularly communities that are exploiting them, taking their money and radicalizing them, basically to sell them products and to make it possible to overthrow democracy. Who are neoliberals? They're Democrats, they're Republicans, they're independents. There are so many people who are neoliberals, many of them don't even know that they are neoliberals. But these are people who believe in the free market. They believe in these top-down type of situations. They do not think that there should be a lot of money invested in social programs and New Deal type programs. They just want to let the markets take care of things. And by the way, you want to know why? Because they profit from it. They're either part of the institutions that make money from those things, or they're stakeholders. They're wealthy to-do elites who aren't worried about, democracy. Why? Because democracy puts them at risk. But they're Democrats, they're Republicans, they're libertarians. They're all over the place. But right now, there are no institutions in place that are going after them. There are certain leftist institutions that are there, but they don't really have any power. They don't really have any say in what's going on, which is why we have to build it, which is why we have to create those institutions and those communities. But I do have to tell you, I think we can do it. And I think that we do it by finding the people who have taken on neoliberalism in their communities, the people who have healed, the people who have organized, the people who have worked to make those communities. Pam. Okay, game it out for me. We create a movement that actually challenges Elon and all of these assholes. What happens then? Great question. And I'm glad you asked it. I want to be honest about this. As I was saying earlier, in the way that the wealthy protect themselves through fascism and authoritarianism, I do have to tell you that if we continue down this path, either way, the clash that determines everything is not going to be pleasant. Either we're going to be organized and they're going to try and break the organization and the communities that we build, or they will simply react to any protest from their authoritarianism and their oppression with some of the like most violent law enforcement crackdowns you could ever possibly imagine, which is one of the reasons, by the way, why they're investing so much in law enforcement and also robot technology and you name it. Also, drones, also algorithms, also surveillance. It doesn't matter what happens. I mean, I guess we could all go to sleep, go to the metaverse, or just stream our lives away and just say, "Fine, that's cool. Take care of everything." I guess we could do that. I don't know about you, but I think that sucks. That sure as hell isn't that isn't the future that I want to be a part of. That isn't the future that I want the people that I care about to live in. But I will say I think there will be a clash, and I think that that clash was always coming. The question is, are we gonna be alone in the streets or are we gonna be together in the streets? I think that's where this whole thing goes and always has been going. That's what labor shows us. That's what labor unions show us. There are these clashes, and that's where it goes. But I do have to tell you, I like our chances, and my chance is a whole lot better if we're together. And if we have common cause, if we have solidarity. Also, by the way, if we out organize them and we just absolutely outflank them, my God, maybe we could get away from whatever clash seems inevitable and we can change this thing through different means. There's a possibility. But I do have to tell you, I don't think a lot of these people are gonna go quietly. I'll just say that. Similar question. Sheila, all right, you're president. What do you do? Well, first of all, you do not want me as president. Um, I thought briefly about running for office, but you don't want me to do that. I'll work on a campaign or something like that, but you don't want me president. I think I think you need a president who uses the bully pulpit because this is one of those situations where I think you use democracy and populism on your side. I think you go after these corporations, monopolies, and trust. I think you bust the living hell out of them. And every time that somebody pushes back, you go out to the people and you say, look what they're doing. Look how they're fighting what you sent me here to do. Um, my God, nationalization of some things, why the hell not? Take the large things on, World Economic Forum, all those, because they are absolutely the bodies who would come after you and try and cut you out at the feet. Also, by the way, I would try and stalk the court so fast. I would I would absolutely stalk the Supreme Court, which I think is important in all of this. You have to say, listen, it's an institution that was stolen. Also, we should push for term limits, we should push for age limits. Yeah, let's go for it. I would be a really, really aggressive president, which is also part of the reason you probably don't want me to be president. Lane says, a term I keep hearing out in the world of the far right is transhumanism. What's going on with that, and how does it fit in with the authoritarian movement and the oppression of the LGBTQ community? So, transhumanism actually has nothing to do with trans people, but the right has absolutely made that what it is. They say that it's all about like transcending our earthly bodies and sticking our finger in the eye of God and all of this. Transhumanism is the idea that at some point or another we will evolve past our bodies and past our basic consciousness using computers and technology. We'll be able to we'll be able to sort of make ourselves cyborgs and try and live forever or whatever. Which I have a problem with a lot of this stuff. Tracy says singularity. Absolutely, that's something that is part of it. But that has nothing to do with trans people, although the right has made it into that. The idea that you can change your sex, which is what they always say about it, is the idea of like customizing your body and all of that. But that's absolutely not what it is. It is a scare tactic that the right has relied on to say that that's where all this is going. And if you allow there to be trans people, like soon you'll be cyborgs and they'll be turning themselves into this and that and all of it. It's scare tactics is all it is. But you do need to know that within the tech world, there is a push for what we would actually deem transhumanism, which is the idea that we'll be able to break down the body for a profit. Also, it's why they say that you probably shouldn't worry about, I don't know, liberal arts or learning anything about, philosophy or literature or anything else that somebody might enjoy, because all of those things are unnecessary, and you'll have a computer that will take care of your brain or do whatever. I mean, it's all a bunch of horse shit, which is what the tech world is, pretty much what the tech world's really interested in, which is just like bullshit in a lot in a lot of different ways. But yeah, it has nothing to do with the LGBTQ community. That unfortunately is something that the right wing has been pushing. I just want to say, by the way, what a repulsive thing in 2022 watching that homophobic anti-trans stuff escalate. That that has been a really, really upsetting thing, and unfortunately, if this thing progresses and if authoritarianism and all of this, uh, continues to happen, we're going to look back at the way that they treated, gay people and trans people, and we're gonna say, "There it is, there's the start of that whole thing." Right? That's those were the vulnerable communities who were targeted, and it's just gonna keep growing and growing and growing. Similarly, Moo Young says, "Happy holidays. Happy holidays. Could you talk about AI art? It's used to dehumanize creativity. It seems to me that reveals a deep resentment towards artists and parallels previous periods where authoritarian movements seem to always attack anything that allows us to dream of something better." There's a lot happening with that. On one hand, I think it is being used to sort of personalize artificial intelligence, almost to say, "Hey, it's a lot like you, and you don't really have to fear it." Also, I don't know if most people know this, but basically, the a lot of the AI art that we have just takes past art and cannibalizes it, and basically steals it in order to create the effect of this thing being artistic. Along with that, I do think the idea of past movements is true. One of the things that you find leading up to fascism is, like, futurism, which was this period of time in which, like, it was a revolt against beauty or, meaningfulness, and as a result, it had a focus on speed and destruction and breaking down, past institutions and things like that. Um the AI art thing is very interesting, and I feel like there is interesting stuff that's happening with it, and there are things about it that I do find fascinating, like the idea of, like, creating this and going in this direction with it. But I do have to tell you, for me, I have a very strong sense of it's almost like the uncanny valley, you know what I mean? When I see it, it makes me uncomfortable, because it just sort of, makes me feel odd, like, when I feel things like that that have been generated. And by the way, on that same note, to go along with a lot of what we're talking about, I've said it in past live streams and conversations, when the right wing talks about shadow banning and algorithms and all that, um they're not wrong that it's problematic. Like, we live in a world that is largely determined by algorithms that we don't see, we don't know about, and we also don't understand. Of course, those algorithms are controlled by corporations and are at the benefit of the wealthy, and the rest of us are just kind of screwed, right? So when the right wing talks about that, they are actually talking about something that's problematic and something that is pretty disturbing. It just so happens that they've been doing it in order to try and take over the algorithm, much like what you saw or what you're seeing with Elon Musk. So it's about control for them and about trying to sort of game the system so that they can have the control, as opposed to liberation or anything even approaching that. But yeah, it's a lot. Tracy said empathy is revolutionary. I completely agree. I think that's something that we have to remember and really sit with. We're approaching an hour. We still got a handful of questions to go through. Um, I just want to say before we hit that hour, thank you again for hanging out. Love doing this. Love having these conversations. I am so excited about what we're going to get up to in 2023. Some really cool plans. Some really, really cool plans, and I can't wait to try and to escalate this fight and to like really, really get into it and get my hands dirty. So let's do the countdown to an hour. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. To the future. Cheers. Good times. Good times. Always glad to do these. All right. Now, Stephanie asked me to talk about this, but AMK's question is what I'm going to read. What are your thoughts on the likely outcome of Moore v. Harper? Also, hoping you'll be visiting San Diego during your upcoming travels. Do you need a bookstore connection here to do so? Happy to help find one. I would love a bookstore connection. Again, if you want me to come to your local bookstore, shoot him an email. Say, hey, here's an author. He has a new book coming out from Dutton Penguin Random House. He said that he's willing to go around and hang out. We should have him. Let's do it. Let's make that happen. But yeah, that's I need your help to do that. I don't know the bookstores, and they want to hear from readers that you want me to come out. So here's the thing. Moore v. Harper is this North Carolina case. What is pushing is the independent legislature theory, which is some horse shit. For those who don't know, this is a theory that basically states should be able to run elections however they want, which is something that is going to allow Republicans to overrule elections and would basically be another stake in the heart of democracy in the United States of America. The origins of it, not surprising. This is fun. So, obviously the problem is Donald Trump, and there were no problems with the Republican Party before Donald Trump. But this was actually just part of a rambling of William Rehnquist from back in 2000. It's hard to think of an election that maybe had anything to do with this, but it was the Bush v. Gore debacle. And just a reminder, by the way, that the Republican Party stole the election of 2000 and the Supreme Court helped them. But the problem is Donald Trump. I mean, 22 years or 16 years later, he came around and he was the one who did that. Anyway, this is part of that absolute garbage legal theory that the Republican Party has been pushing, and that the wealthy have been pushing with all of these judicial picks and stealings. So I don't know what's going to happen. Moore v. Harper is one of those things that I still don't have a good feeling about one way or another. The problem in a lot of this, and Roe v. Wade was one of these moments where I think the Republican Party and the Republican apparatus, I think that they guessed correctly that the time was such in the balkanized status of the United States of America, where there is a red America, blue America, and several of these states that don't necessarily care about one another, that they could overturn Roe v. Wade and there would be some backlash, but it ultimately would not lead to riots in the streets. Well, understanding the balkanization of the United States, they could do this, but also they might not be able to, because if we still have the Electoral College, some of these states where the Republican legislature would do this, like, there's no telling, like, how that would affect the election. Also, by the way, this opens the door for the possibility that the Democrats could do this. It's basically like creating an atom bomb, right? At some point or another that your rival country is going to get a hold of the atom bomb. Do you go ahead and do it, or do you wait on it? How do you sort of manage this? Um, the people that I've talked to who watch the court, they're not clear on whether or not they're ready to pull the trigger on this thing. There are so many different ways that the Republican Party are interfering with elections that we have no idea, like which ones they're going to go with, or whether or not they're going to have to go ahead and allow the states to put in these sort of like I'm not gonna say less problematic, but less obvious ways to fix elections. Um, but yeah, it's really a big question, and I don't know yet. But I will tell you that if they go ahead with this independent legislature theory, um, we're a whole hell of a lot further down this road than I think a lot of people understand. If they go ahead and rule in that direction, um, I I gotta tell you, I think that deals a massive, massive blow to democracy. And at that point, the question becomes whether or not people sit on their hands or whether or not they sit at home. And I think with Roe v. Wade, I think with Roe v. Wade, what happened was a lot of the people in the blue states who were necessarily going to be the ones who went out and caused trouble, they looked around and they said, I still have the right to reproductive care. But in this case, I think there's so much interdependence. Um, I I do feel like right now is probably not the time that they'll go ahead and choose to do that, but also it depends on how far along things are. The Republican Party is in the middle of a massive ideological civil war, which I talk about all the time, but it's going to reach new heights in the next year. So the question is, are they going to go ahead and go down this road? But they also don't have a plan in place to capitalize off of it. Um, yeah, I mean, it's a massive, massive question, and, yeah, I don't know yet. I don't know yet, but I've talked to a lot of people who, feel like there's a possibility, um, that it's not even time for them to feel like they can do it. Gary says, "I'm looking forward to the Midnight Kingdom, and even ordered my dad a copy after American Rule turned him into a lefty," which congratulations, Gary. In researching the new book, what's a moment in history that could have been different and changed a bunch of things? That's a hell of a question. I think we are continuing to live in the consequences of what I would call a failed social revolution in the 1960s and 1970s. I think we look back on that because popular culture, and particularly the mythology that that generation likes to tell itself. It's the idea that everything changed and suddenly everything got better, and this idea that like civil rights made America a non-racist country, and it basically reset everything. And like we had all this music and we did all these things and we protested, but it was a failed social revolution. What actually happened was there were a lot of opportunities for things to have changed permanently. A lot of the support for it went away as the Vietnam War draft ended. And also, Josh is right. The COINTELPRO absolutely strangled it in the crib. And on top of that, um, the anti-establishment fervor of the 60s and the 70s was turned into a commodity that then got sold to that generation, blue jeans and rock and roll. Same thing happened around the world. Like that failed social revolution all around the world was put down. Reactionary capitalism came in its place. And then the powerful went out and they killed every leftist they could find. They used these massive international terrorist organizations, everything from Condor to Gladio, and they just basically went out and killed everybody that they thought could oppose them from the left. I don't know if that necessarily happens if that social revolution goes through. I don't know. So I think we've been living in the consequences of that, and particularly a generation that doesn't necessarily want to sit with it. But that's where my brain goes right now. But if you want to go back, um, I think that there are a lot of moments in history that could have changed a lot of different things. I learned a lot writing this book. So. All right, we got a handful of questions left. Jake, are we going to see some of Biden's worst decisions to come because of the cover of the Republican Party controlling the House? I think depending on whether or not there's going to be some crises coming up, I think we're going to see a rather dormant period of the Biden administration. I think there's going to be some battles over things like the debt ceiling and such. But yeah, I think it's probably going to be a more conservative couple of years from the Biden administration than what we saw. Now, similarly, Otter Nonsense says was the best way to address slash respond to ignore the circus that is about to become the U.S. House of Representatives for the next 2 years. Any chance those members involved with January 6th lose their seats? No, I don't think so. Um, I would just ignore it. The political pageantry of every single day is something that you can just absolutely ignore. And I mean, they're going to hold so many hearings about Hunter Biden's laptop and I mean, the ties in Ukraine, I mean, it's not gonna end, but you don't have to pay attention to it. All of that is about trying to get the attention of politicos and media members in order to try and game them into covering things that are beneficial for them. Ignore it. Absolutely ignore it. You don't have to pay attention to it. Please don't. It's gonna suck. It's gonna be awful. Oh, so much Jim Jordan. Oh, awful. John, I know this is a light question, but do you think Trump's sale of NFT playing cards is just a money laundering scheme? Yeah. Another way to get Saudi money in? Probably. I mean, I bet there's Saudi money in all of this. I will say, by the way, I've had a lot of people over the past few days with these NFT cards who just said to me, they were like, "Do you still think that he's a dangerous person? I mean, look at how ridiculous he is." And it's like, yeah, absolutely. No, absolutely, he is a dangerous person. The grift and the authoritarianism, they go hand in hand, especially in this environment. But what an embarrassing thing. And absolutely, I think that there was money laundering involved in that. I mean, NFTs and crypto have absolutely gone hand in hand with money laundering, 100%. No doubt about that. Not even a question. Finally, Born Free says, weird question. Do you pour your bourbon over one big ice cube? I was told this was better by a whiskey drinker. I do a lot of the time. I have these little ice cube clear guys that I put in here. They're very, very good. But for these talks, I do them straight. So, yeah, that's a good little question. Jacob says, what do I think are chances? I assume of civil war is what that question was. I talk about this a lot. I don't know what's going to happen with that. I think that we're going to see a lot of skirmishes. I think that we are going to see a lot more violence, radicalism. We're going to see a lot more people in our communities joining white supremacist groups and militias. And also, I think, as Elon Musk and people like that absolutely need their help, I think we're going to see those grow. So I think we're going to see skirmishes, but I don't think we're going to see a full scale civil war. God, I hope not. That'd be awful. Ah, knock on wood. No, I don't think we're gonna see a full scale thing, but I do think it's gonna be pretty rough. I'll just say that. More unrest, I agree, and more. All right, that's gonna bring us to the end, the last bourbon talk of 2022. I wanna say, first of all, I am so appreciative of all of your support. Like I said, a lot of ups and downs this year. Some really really low lows, but some really really high highs. And I hope I hope that the latter was in a higher number for you than the former. Um, but yeah, the support has been so much. I finished the Midnight Kingdom. I left academia, and the support from you all has been so much, so much, and you've made me believe in the possibilities of community and the possibilities of solidarity and building a movement. And I truly, truly, truly believe we're going to get it done. And I 2023 is going to be a fight, but I'm gonna be out there, and I hope you'll join me. I hope you'll go into 2023 wanting to be an active participant, and that includes everything from talking with your coworkers, talking with your family members, talking with your friends, making sure that you're all having a discussion about what's going on in the world, but also in each other's lives. Build that trust, build that intimacy. If you make art, Make art about changing. If you write about the possibilities of a future world. Spend your time working on yourself, working on your relationships, working on your health, working on building these bonds. It's so much and it's so important. If you wanna go volunteer with local community organizations that take care of each other, do that. If you have the time and the energy and the space, do that. Get involved in local politics. Go and volunteer for these things. Join community organizations that usually don't have people and would absolutely kill to have you come in and help them. But also build these communities and these bonds. Talk about what matters to you. Talk about the information that we talk about here. Start building those things. Find opportunities for solidarity. Even if it's just having a conversation with a stranger or a neighbor, just talk. Ask them how they are. A lot of people don't get asked that anymore. Neoliberalism atomized us to the point where we don't talk to one another. We don't trust each other anymore. Get in the fight. We're going to talk more about how to do that. I've got some announcements coming up, some really, really cool things, and I hope you'll join me. Just want to say cheers to all the hard work, to the solidarity we've engaged in, and all of the support. You are the absolute best. Cheers. All right. I'll see you in 2023. Be safe. Have good holidays.